In this lecture, we'll be focusing on module number 1, which is the principles of management. Right. So without a further ado, let's get started. So this is the course content. I mean the module content, the definition, the importance of management, and functions of management, and its relevance to government and quasi-government departments. Right. And then we'll talk about private contractors, contracting firms, and organizational structure. Right. So let's define what is management. Before we define management, let's take a look at the etymology of the term management. Etymology is the origin of the name, or just like where it got, where the word management was derived, or something like that. Right. So let's take a look at that. That's the etymology. It's actually a action word, which is a verb called manage. That comes from an Italian word called managere, which means to handle, especially with the tools or something like this. Is the classical, the word which is probably from the prehistoric period. So people who handles materials, especially with the tools or something like that. Like it's how the word manage has come, like managere. It's an Italian word, and then it was in fact even the Italian word itself got its origin from the Latin word called manus, which means hand, like especially anything which is maneuverable or can be done with their hand or manual effort. So that's called manage or manageri, right? Later it gets, probably modified, and then it gets into French, and it has changed to management. So that is what it is. First is mesnagment, then it is management, then finally in the 17th and 18th century, it got turns into a word called management. Right. So this is the etymology of the term management. So probably this will give you an overview of the term itself. Like it's all about managing. It could be either managing time, or managing materials, or managing money, or managing people, or managing any resources. Right. So that's what we call management. Right. Let's take a look at the some of the classical definitions of management. So that will give you an idea of what is management. So all organization, irrespective of any genre, all business environment requires management, right? Somewhere. So a typical example is like why we go for management is that, like why we need management is that. One thing is our resources are minimum. So resources in the sense like it be time or materials or even people or anything to consume what's called resources, that's very limited, right? We need to accomplish certain tasks with a minimum time, right? So or optimum time. So that's why we need management. So management is a concept, right? Another thing is that like if something goes wrong, like there should be someone to pull it back in the right track, or to find an alternative solution. So that case also we need an expert or a member, in fact, which is also known as a management, right? Something like that, right? So these are the important significance, or you can even call the necessary for a management, right? So this, keeping this in mind, people have defined management in a various way. The first is Harold Nutz. He has defined management as an art of getting things done through and with the people in formally organized group, right? So as I told you, there's a set of people, say board members in an organization, or a team leader in a team in an IT company. Say those are like formally organized groups. So they set right things, or they do accomplish certain tasks for the objective of the organization, right? So that is what Harald Notes mentioned as like a management, right? And he also mentioned that it is an art of creating an environment. So Notes believe that it is not a scientific thing. Like it is considered to be an art. Like art cannot be universally, accepted, or it can be, considered to be, the scientific principle. So it depends on different people. So that is why the characteristics of CEO of bigger companies are like very important, or the company requires some skills which is pretty unique from others. So that's kind of pretty much an art than a science, right? Right. So Newts believe it's an art of creating environment. It's not something like a science or a learned stuff or something like that. So it believes that it's an inherent potential or a creativity of a person, that who creates an environment in which people can perform and individuals can cooperate together, right? So attain the group goals or something like that. So far, we have defined management as an art, like art of getting things, art of creating environment. It's more of an art and creativity. But that's not true, because if it is that case, then we can have only one unique person who can only does a particular certain task or something. Later, many researchers worked on the scientific principles of management, right? So people talk about like why it can't be a scientific principle, or why we can develop some framework so that it can be applied to all other environment or something like that, right? So one of the pioneer researchers is Frederick Winslow Taylor, who is considered to be the father of scientific management or modern management, right? So after him, like management was seen as more of an a science than an art. But then in the initial stage, he also defined it as an art of knowing what to do, when to do, and see that is done in the best and cheapest way. So more of an economics comes into picture, where he also looks into doing stuff not only in a quicker time but also in a cheaper way. So that's a classical definition of management. And there are humpty numbers of definitions of management. You can probably surf online or read some management textbooks. So you can read, but I feel these two are pretty much important. So one, Harold Notes definition is more of an art, right? You just say creativity and other things. But Frederick Winslow Taylor focused primarily on some framework, like what to do, when to do, and the outcome also in a cheaper way or something like that. So these two definitions are pretty much good. So probably you can take a look at that and the other definitions of management as well. Right. So there are two things. One is called effective and efficient. Right. So a good management should be both effective and efficient. So these two terms can have a synonymously similar meaning, but in fact, when you take a look at this in a much closer view, you understand its differences, like the prime difference. The prime difference is that effective is doing appropriate tasks. Say, for example, in an organization, there is a team. The team does the task very accurately. They perform the task meticulously, and they do very accurately without any error all the time, right? So that is pretty much an effective team. They call it as a effective team. But will that be called as efficient? Right? So when you talk about efficient, we should really look into accomplishing the task in a minimum time. Say, for example, if some company is doing a tendering, the tender date or the close of the call of the tender is something like in 2 days time. No matter how accurately the team performs, they have to finish it by that deadline, right? What happens if the tender the organization prepares or the team prepares is very good, very accurate, but what happens if they surpass the deadline? So accuracy can be one factor. Another factor is the efficiency. They have to do it with the minimum time or the optimal time. So that is the meaning of efficient, right? And also very importantly, they should avoid wastages or something like that in terms of time or resources. Here means like time, materials, and many. Say for example, too many equipments can yield a good construction, but are they are profitable to the organization, or will that is pretty much required, which can be done with a minimum number of equipment, right? So those things are called efficient, right? So that is why a good management should be not only should be effective but also should be efficient, right? Same, this is a definition of any personals. Also personals, say for example, if you call somebody a good leader, it should be both efficient as well as an effective. Like efficient is someone who does a good job, fairly good welfare to the people or his subordinates, and also should be done in a stipulated time, not like when there is a need he does not do, thinking that I'm an effective person, I will take time and do it. No, when at the moment what a person does is very important in an effective way. So that's basically the hallmark of a good personnel as well, right? So this is typically the significance or the characteristics of a good management. So this is a pretty much important. Kindly pay attention to this. Like this eight, probably you can call seven. Seven ways you can define a management. The first is management as a process. Next is the management as an activity. Then management as a discipline, and management as a group, and management as a science, and management as an art. And sometimes it is called both science and art. And then we call management as a profession, right? Something like that. So we'll be defining this in a much detail. So I repeat, management as a process, management as an activity, and management as a discipline, and management as a group, and management as a science, and management as an art. And can be both science as well as an art, and then management as a profession, right? Let's take a look at the first one. Management as a process. Like, what do you call as a process? We know what is a project. Like, it has a definite start and end period. But process is an intermediate step to accomplish the project, which is the task or something like it is the you know characteristics or it's a decision making entity, right? So that is what called a process. Generally, say for example, if you go to a bank, right? So if you want to withdraw a particular amount from your account, then you have to take your passbook as well as the withdrawal form, right? So if you don't take any one of these, like for example, if you don't take your passbook or you don't take your withdrawal form or you don't get withdrawal form in the bank, you can't able to do. So to accomplish a withdrawal from your account, the bank requires two important processes. One is to bring the passbook and also the withdrawal form duly filled and signed by you, right? So those are process, right? If you don't get that, then the things does not work in the bank, or your task, which is the to take the or to withdraw the money, may not be possible, right? Same way, management as a process, say construction project management. So you need to do a lot of activities, like for example, you're constructing a residential building, a single story residential building. You need to start from the site clearing, do the earthwork excavation, then laying the PCC for footing. Then you can do footing, plinth beam, columns, beams, slabs, then filling of the the frame structure with the walls, brick walls, or so many decisions, right? So all those things are processes, right? So in every process there is a certain decision making. Say for example, as I told you, the brick works you can do either with conventional clay brick, or you can do with the hollow blocks, or sometimes now people talk about modular construction, where you don't need any fillers, you don't need any frame structure, you can directly construct with the modules or with the using the modular formwork systems where everything is concrete. So something like that. So those things are called process. That decision making at every processes is management. That's what they say. Right. Say for example, modular construction, I told you it's pretty much good. It's a very rigid structure. It is very much good against seismic actions or earthquake, but it's pretty expensive, right? But as whereas in a brick, it is less expensive, but it's not very sustainable. You are taking the clay out of the environment, right? So people talk about hollow blocks, but hollow blocks have got the problem related to the temperature variation. So the R value, the insulation, all other factors can play a huge role, right? And then people talk about different synthetic materials like gypsum, and are they really, environment friendly, or will that cause hazardous thing? So all those things, no, that processes is just the managerial thing. So that's what we call management as a process. The next is the management as an activity. Like it is pretty much similar to what we defined as a process, but it is to accomplish a task. Like doing this, you get this. Say for example, if you can't or for example, if you do an earthwork excavation and the water table has risen, or during some flood or during rainy season, The pits you excavated can be, full of water. So water can percolate into the pit. So in the initial process, you may not have coated for dewatering, so removal of water in that pit. Why? So in that case, you need to perform this particular activity, which you have not defined during your tendering period or something. Right? So in before tender phase itself, I mean before you quote for that particular contract, in a tender, you have to include this as an optional clause. Like in case if there's a rain, or in case if it is something like the water table can come up, that case we need to do a dewatering process. That's an optional case. If you don't really to do that, you can really avoid that. But if you have to necessarily do that, then you can quote from your tender itself. Like it's an optional case and it's an unavoidable. You cannot directly pour concrete or play PCC in the water drenched the earth pit or something like that, right? So those are called activities. So those decisions and those tasks need to be considered to be as a management or a manager activity, right? In a nascent form, say in academic perspective, so if you don't do your Cat 1 and Cat 2 or your digital assignment, so no matter you score even 100 out of 100 in a pad, you can't able to accomplish this course or complete this course. So it's a kind of a sequential activity. Then you have to do all the mandatory requirements to get the final grading for this particular course. So that is pretty much an activity, right? So that's how, like for example, if you do not perform your Cat 1 very well, or your Cat 2, so you have to really accomplish your DA and also your PAT pretty good. Then only your grades can go up, something like that, right? So that is kind of a managing different activities or something, right? So that's how management is considered to be an activity. The next is very important thing is called management as a discipline, right? So this is pretty much a modern definition in which we talk about MBA and something like degrees that given on management, like MBA in HR, human resource management, and MBA in finance and MBA in technology management. Those were not pretty common or popular some 15, 20 years before. So now technology management, most of the engineers wanted to pursue in or wanted to pursue a career in management field, they do technology management. So with their engineering degree as well as with the knowledge they acquire during their technology management course, will be benefited to them, right? Something like that. So most of the IT companies, they require like kind of a technology management stuff. People who have got this technological management degree, they just value a little bit from the people with only engineering degree or something. Of course, experiences also matters, but when you compare a person with the same experience with a degree in terms of technology management, something like that, right? That's considered to be a little bit more higher when compared to the one with only the engineering degree or something like that. Right? Or they might restrict with only software development or something like with an engineering degree, computer science, or something like testing or something like that. But a person with technology management can be used for business environment to sell their product, or even people with a marketing degree, they might use it for selling their product or something like that. If it is a product-based company, right? Then management, that's why management is called as a discipline. It's just something like a degree that you possess or something like that, right? So that's called management as a discipline. Then management as a group, right? So this is what I call in the previous scenario, like the board of managers or people, set of people who consider to be the top most people or something like that. So that's called management, right? See, this is pretty much common even in non-profit organization and even in a government organization, where the directors and probably the in the highest scenario, it could be collectors, district collectors, who would be the head of the particular government organization, right? So it's kind of a group rather than it is a process, activity, or even a discipline. So something like board of members, and in academics, it's board of studies members or academic council members, and so on, right? Something like that. And sometimes probably can think of a bigger company like Apple or Google. They have got their CEO and the CFOs and other people. They're forms a group or something like that. So you can probably see a movie called Steve Jobs. Probably they would have defined the group heads and something like that. They talk about group meetings and how they develop their Macintosh, the earlier versions, and Lisa, the probably the software in older versions of the Macintosh personal computer or something like that. Then it's pretty much important is management as a science. This is what we talk about, applying the managerial principles to different environment with mathematics as well as the quantitative as well as qualitative approaches. Like in the module number 5, 6, and 7, we'll be looking into the network diagram. We'll be analyzing the network diagram. So what we do is we mimic the actual processes or activities in terms of different modules, and then we'll give time to it, or else we'll provide time as well as some cost data to the particular activity, and then we analyze like which activity takes longer time or which chain of activities, which is called critical path, would tends to alter the project duration or enhance the project duration, or that determines the project duration. All those things we'll be taking a look at in much detail, and those things can correlate to management as a science, right? So this is a pretty much a classical definition of management, right? And management as an art is pretty much the classical definition, but even still people believe management to be an art, like it is a unique entity. Not everybody can become a manager. So one who possesses the leadership skills like sympathy, then a lot of other qualitative perspectives are required to become a good manager, right? Say that is why the CEO of a company is considered to be a very prime, asset of an organization. So they select the best person in their entire organization to become the to take good decisions, like in the level of top level of the organization, right? Something like that, right? So that's kind of a management as well. But in rather many cases, management is both science as well as an art. Like you talk about people who, in the topmost level, they have some knowledge on the pretty much like in the managerial aspects. Like once, even in an interview, the CEO of Google, Sundar Pichai, have talked about game theory. He just talk about no non-zero sum game and all, right? So this he has got a good knowledge on the business environment as well as the operational research, you can call that, right? So that's kind of a pretty much he knows science as well as is a unique guy, is a bright. He has got a lot of vision. He has done a lot of innovations in Google. So it's kind of a pretty much an art. So he has got acquired a lot of knowledge in terms of science as well as in the art. So that's why people tend to call that to be a science as well as an art. Like for example, art is something like you take a look at the example of a cricket Indian team itself. Like so, all players, like 13 or 14 players in the squad, have the same coach and same captain and something. Say you take five batsmen, top order five batsmen, do all perform the same, right? Some people in the top order have got their own skills, right? So they have their own, uh, stuff and something like that, right? So that's kind of a more of an art than as a science. But a person was given a huge opportunities and he plays a lot of tournaments and practice, he might acquire skills like so. It's kind of a more of a science or scientific training than it's more of an art. So that's why there's always a debate, it is management is an art or a science. But generally we can conclude it cannot be purely art or it can be purely science, but it can be only both art and science. Then management as a profession. So this is where the modern definition of management comes into picture. It is more of a profession like senior manager, general manager, district DGM, and so on, right? Regional manager and something like that, or sales manager in terms of functional departments in an organization, like sales, marketing manager, or even finance manager and something like that. So this has now become a profession, right? So they, for example, to have financial manager in an organization, he should have a basic degree in finance. So, which means he might acquire a degree, or he has to possess experience in that particular field, right? So it's more of a discipline activity, and science comes into picture, right? So it's more of a profession rather than it's an individual process or activity or discipline or something like that. And it can be even group also. As I told you, it's a functional group. Financial manager is managing the financial things in an organization. He does not recruit people like the HR manager does, something like that, right? So that's pretty much a profession nowadays, right? So these are the seven important, way in which you can define management, right? So you can take a look at this pretty much whenever you're free, so you can understand these things in much detail. All right, so this completes today's lecture. So we have talked about the definitions of management. Before that, we talked about the etymology, the origin of the word management. Then we talked about the definitions of management. Then we have defined the hallmark of a good manager or a management, which is being both effective as well as efficient.